things become very normalized when you're in burnout. And one of the things that started coming about is that I really love like the long, dangly, kind of fun earrings because I have the capacity to like look at what I'm wearing that day and pick out the fun ones. And I'm not working in a pediatric hospital, so I'm not having kids try to grab at my face either, which also helps. But so it has kind of become a very signature thing for me is wearing like the fun kind of dangly earrings, and where before I just didn't have that capacity to think about what I was wearing.
Welcome to What's Your Story, Doris Taylor. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you. I'm really appreciative of you having me on today.
Today, we're going to use my time traveler framework and talk about past, present, and future. And we're going to start off with looking at a picture.
So
what do we see here? Go ahead.
This picture is of me. That was probably like 15 years ago. So I'm wearing a nice, cozy, a very colorful sweater. So I worked at a pediatric hospital here in Seattle, and I had a couple parents mention to me about how I was the nurse who always wore the cozy sweaters. And that's exactly like it. Hospitals tend to be chilly. And I tend to run cold. And so it's a nice kind of fuzzy, warm, comforting sweater that I'm wearing. And I'm sitting in the back office of the GI clinic, which is where I worked for 13 years. And I sent you this photo because looking at this photo, and I did a blog post about this as well, kind of my journey through burnout, is I just look exhausted. I look at my face and I have dark circles around my eyes and I just look tired. And that's how I really felt like throughout most of my career, was just exhausted and tired. And, today I just wanted to talk about my journey through burnout and kind of what I do now. And this picture really kind of exemplifies how tired I was, but it's so normalized. Like you don't even realize how tired you might be just because that's just your existence and that's just your normal. And so so that's why I sent you this picture, is because I look exhausted.
One thing I noticed about this picture when you sent it to me was that it actually, your sweater and your t-shirt have your brand colors, the purples for Moonshine Wellness, which is your company now, and the red accents. So, and the coziness, I feel like I see current Doris there, but I see what you mean. You're smiling, but you kind of it looks a little half-hearted maybe, or there's something going on behind the smile.
It's just I'm smiling.
Yeah.
You should smile for photos, even though I don't even remember the context around this photo. But it was when I first started working at the hospital, because we had an office, a nurse's office, and there was 3 of us nurses there. And then we got booted out into the hallway because then that became a doctor's office, because they couldn't even, they just expanded. We lost our break room and the nurses lost our office. And then we had to be in this long hallway spaced out. I found it several years ago and I was like, oh, that's interesting, because I was going through photos from work, and we had a lot of fun a lot of times in the back office, working at a pediatric office. It was nice because we would dress up for Halloween. And so I've looked through our old Halloween photos and we would do themes. We were 101 Dalmatians one year.
Uh-huh.
And so we had a lot of fun, but it was everyone was very exhausted.
One thing I notice about this picture, and we've talked about this before, is that I don't see earrings. And one of your signature style situations, which you have today, is you have pretty awesome earring game. So tell us a little bit about that back then and now.
So I would always wear studs when I would wear earrings because I wanted something that I didn't have to, I had decision fatigue. So I would always wear something that I could leave in for months, if not longer. Like, I didn't have to think about what I was wearing necessarily because I didn't have the capacity. I had 2 young kids that I was single parenting. I worked full time as a nurse. I didn't have the capacity to be making daily decisions as to what I was wearing. And that's one thing that I really noticed that was surprising to me when I quit working in the fall of 2021. There was a mass exodus of nurses and people in healthcare out of healthcare. And it took me a year to really feel like I was recovering from burnout. And it's surprising, again, how things become very normalized when you're in burnout. And one of the things that started coming about is that I really love like the long, dangly, kind of fun earrings because I have the capacity to like look at what I'm wearing that day and pick out the fun ones. And I'm not working in a pediatric hospital, so I'm not having kids try to grab at my face either, which also helps. But so it has kind of become a very signature thing for me is wearing like the fun kind of dangly earrings. And where before I just didn't have that capacity to think about what I was wearing, it was very like I needed very simple like that what do they call it? The capsule wardrobe
Yes.
where you just have
Yes.
like 5 pieces and then you just pull from them every day, and that's why I wore very similar clothing where I had the comfy sweaters on, and I had a sweater at work, which is funny because it was a brown sweater that I would pull on when I got chilly, and it was one of my coworkers hated it because it was brown, and but I was like, it was so cozy and comfortable, and when your nervous system is so dysregulated, that's what I gravitated towards was I wanted to feel cozy and warm in order to give the best care that I could. And so I had all these like fuzzy sweaters but no earrings. And now feel I'm the opposite where I don't have as many cozy sweaters, but I have fabulous earrings. So
I love it. I love that. That's what an amazing symbol. Let's go back a little bit before that picture was taken. And I'd love to find out from you something I've never asked you, even though we've known each other for a couple of years, is what made you decide to become a nurse and what did you think it was going to be?
so I graduated high school in the mid 90s and my mom's a nurse. She's an LPN. My grandmother's an RN on my mom's side. So there's a strong family history of working as a nurse. And I think there was a strong family history of that codependent enabling piece, which I think a lot of nurses are. And so in my head, growing up in the 80s and the early 90s, I didn't know that there was anything else except for those woman-dominated fields, which was teaching and nursing. And so when I was in middle school, that's what I was looking at was either becoming a teacher or becoming a nurse. And I ended up deciding on being a nurse. I don't know why and what in particular like pushed me more towards that, except looking back, I feel I would have loved to become a naturopath because my natural bent is towards not taking pharmaceuticals and doing more of a holistic approach to my health. But that wasn't a thing. That wasn't a career anyone talked about or I knew about in the mid 90s when I graduated. And so started college and I knew that's what I wanted to be. I didn't really have a lot of expectations because I didn't have a lot of knowledge about what nursing looked like except for ER maybe on TV. So I didn't really know what was to be expected. And I think that was a good thing and a bad thing. I graduated in 2001 and it was like, this is just how nursing is. And so I think that, I, yeah, that's a good question because it's definitely hard. And I started out on a med surge floor, which it's a medical surgical floor. It's where if you had a surgery, you get put on the floor, or if you have like an infection, you also get put on the floor. It's kind of a catch-all for a lot of different things. And so you get very knowledgeable about a little bit about everything. And so that also was a great growth opportunity for me because you're just exposed to a lot of stuff as a nurse. And it's really hard. Like, I feel like when I left nursing school, I was burned out. Like, I had this original thought of becoming a nurse practitioner, but I didn't read a book for like 5 years after nursing school because I was so burned out and exhausted. And so I didn't, like, I just kind of like jumped in and doing the nursing thing without having a lot of preconceived notions of what it should be like. Because a lot of what it should be like is based in probably in like the 70s and 80s or 70s and before, when nursing was very different than when I joined the workforce in the early 2000s. It was already very corporatized at that point.
So let's explore the corporatized piece and sort of what surprised you, and maybe moving towards the Doris in that picture that we saw, and then all the way that arc towards burnout when you actually left the profession. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I didn't realize how corporatized healthcare was until I actually left the profession, because it is just how it is, right? Like, and we we don't have those small hospitals anymore that we used to because they're getting bought up. The hospital I started at in Colorado, so I graduated from the University of Southern Colorado in 2001, and there was two independent hospitals, and I worked at one which is now no longer independent. It's part of Colorado's CSU, the University of Colorado. It's one of the big systems that now has a big healthcare system as well. And so it was so it didn't feel very corporate, but it was already like there was mandatory overtime. And as a new grad, you don't know that that's not standard to not
Mm,
work 3 12s one week and then 4 12s the next. It should be 3 12s every week, and that's full time. And so that really contributed to my burnout. Within the first year of working, I was really burned out. And and it was a non union position, and you don't realize how other systems do it because you're just starting out, right? You don't have
sure.
the experience for it. And so really that was the normal. And I didn't realize how corporate healthcare was until I left, because I kept saying to people that I felt as if I had corporate PTSD from feeling like you had to have a manager on top of you, like telling you what to do. There was like this anxiety about it, even though I work for myself. There's still this anxiety about it. And so it took me 2 to 3 years, even after I quit, to realize how corporate that healthcare system is. And it's that top down management style where you don't really have a say in your job situation, because they're not asking you for your opinion. They're telling you your opinion. And
Right.
so it just that is just how healthcare is. And it wasn't until after I quit and I started working as an admin at a community midwifery clinic, where I saw their relationship with their patients. And I was like, oh, that's patient centered care. That is the non corporate healthcare system that the hospitals want to go. They say they are patient centered care, but they can't, because you only get 20 minutes with a patient, and the midwives get 30 to 60 minutes or 90 minutes, right? And because they can just do they can create their own schedule. They don't have this corporate office saying they have to do their patient schedules in
Right.
a certain amount of time. And so it's really been a process to be able to look back at the 25 years since I graduated and see myself from this small hospital, which was independent at the time, but still had that corporate model, to going to a pediatric hospital here in Seattle, where when I first started, so I came from the adult world, and when I walked into the hospital the first time as a travel nurse, it was like, oh, this is so different from an adult. Like, it smells different. Like, there's a smell to hospitals. Whenever you walk on a floor, it's like, yeah, right. Like,
Hmm.
you can sense. And so it didn't smell, and people were happy, which I was like, that's weird. People are happy to be at their job. That's crazy. Crazy talk. and they wanted to be there. It was such a different environment. So when I started working at the pediatric hospital, that's what I walked into from working in these adult systems where people were there, they're doing their best, but the system was also against them doing their work. And a lot of times nurses have to create workarounds to get our job done. But the system itself is trying to, like, not, it's not supportive in us actually getting our work done. We have to create these workarounds. It's like, oh, this is the new EMR. How am I going to do my job within this new electronic medical record system that I don't fully understand and doesn't really fill my needs? And so, but when I first started, so I was 13 years into this pediatric hospital. When I first started, it was a very different atmosphere. And then when I left, it had completely switched over to this corporate feel, and where it was top-down management. If you're not happy to be here, then you can leave. And but I, even then, it was so normalized that this is how it is. It wasn't until I left and I was able to really start processing things where it was like, oh, this is like corporate healthcare. And it's not built to support the people in it, whether you're working in it or a patient. It's about the bottom line.
You did a great job of setting the stage of the context and the corporate and sort of the external pieces. And I think this is a great time to kind of explore what is burnout. Maybe you could define it for us or how you see it. And then how did that manifest for you in your body, in your mind, when you were dealing with this in such a way that you ended up leaving the field? And then now you have a business that's based around helping people survive and thrive after burnout.
Right. So burnout can be hard to define because it's very different for a lot of people. And a lot of what I see is people becoming, you're chronically angry or irritable. Like I like to kind of describe it in a polyvagal lens where with regarding your nervous system, because your nervous system is just very dysregulated and that shows up very different ways. And so it can show up in a very hyper state where your nervous system, you're always activated. So you're irritable, you don't have patience for people, or it shows up of where you're always doing things for other people and you never make the time for yourself, which is a very common nurse trait. So you're not able to deregulate into what I call or what is called the window of tolerance, which is where you feel centered and calm, and you can take a deep breath and you're not like breathing really shallowly. Or it shows up where you're in this hypo state, which is where my state generally was, where it felt I was tired all the time and I felt exhausted. Like my biggest thing is that I felt I was always chasing having more energy because I felt tired and exhausted all the time. And I truly feel like I was heading into having chronic fatigue syndrome if I hadn't quit, because I was just constant. Like you look at that picture and you can just see like the dark circles around my eyes. I was tired. I was exhausted all the time. And so it showed up for me in that chronic exhaustion. A lot of times I would hit this wall in the winter and I was like, oh, well, it's winter, right? Like you want to be relax, you don't want to be on that go, go, go cycle in the winter, but really it feels like you're just constantly hitting this wall. And at some point you just can't go over that wall. And so it can be, burnout can be hard to recognize because what happens becomes very normalized. Like the dealing with the chronic stress is we grow tolerant to what we weren't tolerant to a year ago. Like, oh, this is fine for right now, and you think it will get better, and sometimes it does get better. Like if you had like insomnia and you used to have it once or twice a month, and then suddenly you're having it 2 or 3 times a week, it becomes your normal to feel like you just have insomnia more frequently
Right.
without realizing the context of it and what can be contributing to it. So that's the hard part, is that it shows up very differently until people really hit a wall and they're like, I can't do this. My wall was I was turning 45 and I have 20 more years of working, and I can't be so disengaged from my life. I always felt very stressed about not having enough time, but then I would get sucked into my phone and doom scroll for 2 or 3 hours in the evening. The kids would go to bed. I should be getting ready for bed, but you're too tired to like read a book, but you're not tired enough to go to sleep. And so then you get sucked into your phone because you also get those dopamine hits of like, okay, this
Mhm.
feels kind of good. And then 3 hours later, and it's like midnight, and you're like, I should have just gone to bed. But it also feels good to do that. And so you're soothing your emotions in a certain way. And so it feels good, even though you're also like, I don't want to really be doing this. But
That's very relatable in modern life, right? I mean, I think I'm sure nurses and people in high stress jobs, but the introduction of phones has kind of remapped our brains, right? And those dopamine hits. So, yeah,
right.
we're all at risk for that, I would say.
Right. And anyone who, it's not just people in healthcare,
Yeah.
it's anyone who's in this modern end stage capitalism phase where we are,
Yeah.
is we're all overwhelmed and we're all in survival mode. And your body's trying to figure out how to manage and survive through this chronic stress. And that's essentially what it is our systems are not built for this modern lifestyle. We're built for, you know, 500 years
Right.
ago when we didn't have phones and we didn't have this chronic stress.
Right.
And now our systems are like, whoa, like that bear's coming after us every day. And that's really hard. But that's
I'm gonna sneak another picture in because I think
right.
this is a good time to talk about. We've identified the problem. Let's talk about Moonshine Wellness for a second and tell me about this. You didn't know I was going to show you this picture, but I brought it into the conversation. Tell me about this.
I love this picture. So this is a photo shoot that Laura helped me with. So this is a photo of me holding a magnet that Laura helped me create last year. And so it says, how are you feeling today, across the top? And it's a round wood magnet. And then it has my lovely unicorn logo or mascot on it. And then my name behind it. And it's being held in my hand with my sweater, my cozy sweater over part of my hand. And then it's being held over little cups of my herbs because I make herbal body oils and herbal teas. And it's just really speaks to what I try to convey in my business of one, that there's resources out there and you can start where you are when you're thinking about, I might be kind of burned out. It's looking at these little check-ins of, how are you feeling today? How am I feeling today? How am I doing today? And that's really where I try to support people where they are and help them realize that it doesn't have to be this big, massive intervention to start working and getting out of burnout, but it's these little check-ins where you're acknowledging where you are, because you think of what happens in January 1st where everyone's like, I'm going to change my life and start
Yeah.
working out 6 days a week and run a marathon in a month. And then people quickly stop doing that. It's these gentle check-ins that are more effective than these big major life overhauls.
Love that. And I love the reappearance, the theme of the cozy sweater, even though maybe you have fewer of them. It's comforting. The picture shows a sort of a comforting nature. And can you tell us just a little bit about your teas and your herbal? You mentioned that in another life, you might have been a naturopath or a teacher. And I feel like you're actually kind of doing both in some ways, or things adjacent to that. But I'd love you to share with the audience a little bit about your things that you make and how you decided to do that.
Yeah, so I remember very vividly, I was working at Swedish First Hill as a traveler on their renal floor, so their kidney floor. And I had a patient who I worked day shift, and I would give him a cupful, the medicine cupful of pills twice a day. So he got morning and noon, and I'm sure he got evening pills as well, but I was off shift by then. And he made the comment that it was like his pill taking started with one pill, and then he was taking another pill to counteract the side effects of that one pill. And before he knew it, he was taking this whole medicine cup full of pills. And that just clicked something in me where because I hadn't really thought much about my own health. I was in my late 20s. I didn't have any medical issues. I worked in the healthcare system, but I didn't have to access the healthcare system personally. And it really made me rethink how what I'm doing affects not just your current health, but your long-term health. And so that's when I did the deep dive rabbit hole of looking at not just natural healthcare, but like natural cleaning supplies and not using bleach and everything you put in, on, and around your body and how that affects you. And now there's a lot more research on like PFAS and estrogenic properties where you have, plastic that has estrogen mimicking chemicals that have been found in breast cancer cells and all those, how that every bit of those plays into your longevity, and not just your longevity though, but what your quality of life is. And so that really started me on this journey of one, what can you make yourself? Because then you know what's in it. And so the funny thing is with the pandemic and everyone was having all these online sales for these programs, and I've always been interested in natural health and herbs, and I was starting to grow my own herbs, but because of the pandemic, suddenly I had all this extra time and money on my hands. And so I bought into an online herbalist program, and I bought into a program on how to make herbal body oils. And that's when I started making my St. John's wort oil and then figuring out how to use it for myself as well. And then it started, okay, here's a St. John's wort, let's add an arnica and some lavender, and that became my tension release oil blend. And it just, because I started having more time and I was trying to figure out my own health problems, because by then I was in my mid 40s and it felt much more like I was starting to feel like chronic exhaustion like all the time. And I was like, what do I do to help myself differently versus taking a pill every day for something, or like getting a caffeine addiction, which I also saw a lot where people had their lattes in the morning and then at 3 p.m. you're having that standing in line at the coffee shop, like 10 people deep because everyone's having that caffeine slump.
Yes.
And I'm a tea drinker, so I never started drinking coffee. I don't like the taste of it. I don't really like the smell of it. I'm envious of the caffeine culture, especially here in Seattle, because everyone's got their latte Americano thing. And so after I started making my herbal body oils, I started making teas, because tea, even when I was working at the pediatric hospital, became a cozy, comforting moment for me before I started my day. Before I sat down at my computer and opened up and started answering phone calls and emails and talking to doctors and going to clinic, that cup of tea became a very much a ritual for me of relaxing my nervous system, even just a little bit. I didn't even know what I was doing, but I just instinctively was doing that. And so then I started making my own teas. And when I talk to clients, a lot of times I say, create some rituals of relaxation. There's people who have a very negative reaction to saying wellness tools, because it's been pushed down our throats and we're like, we just,
or self-care too.
right.
Yeah.
And And so I try to reframe it a little bit different as like rituals of relaxation. You're
Mhm.
relaxing your nervous system, you're regulating your nervous system a little bit differently, and use something like tea because, what I make is very herbal. So there's no caffeine in it. And I make it usually I'll use lemon balm, which is great for anxiety, or passion flower, which is great for bringing if you have racing thoughts, and it's great for bringing you kind of back into your body. And so the tea is very formulated to help you regulate your nervous system a little bit differently. And the same with the herbal body oil. It's to help you regulate your nervous system a little bit differently outside of an anxiety medication, or,
Right.
some pharmaceutical. I make a sleep tea for people to try to see if they can not take an Ambien every night. People. So it's people who are herb curious.
One thing I like about it too is that, and I've used, your teas and your products. I have your little roller thing that I've been using. It
Right.
smells really good too. Is that kind of related to what you were talking about before with your earrings and not taking the time to make a choice or to sit with something? And when you make tea, when you heat up water and you brew tea, there's some intention there. There's the herbs have a real effect, the herbalism piece of it, but also you're taking a little time, you're taking a moment, but it feels achievable. Again, it's not like you're going to suddenly become like a CrossFit, like super whatever athlete or something, right? But
Right.
you can make 5 minutes to brew your tea and drink your tea. So giving oneself permission to, and then maybe say, how am I feeling today? Right. To check
Right.
in with oneself. So yeah.
A lot of it is just relearning how to slow down,
Hmm.
because we're so in this hustle culture as well, whether you think you're hustling or not. I just worked one job, and I was still constantly going and doing, and not we learn not to prioritize ourselves, and
Right.
that's selfish, right? And so it's relearning to prioritize ourselves and slow down. Like, what are we rushing to?
Right.
And that's also the how are you feeling today? It's just being able to slow down and check in with yourself and feel your feelings and acknowledge them, and
Hmm.
then thinking of how you want to do things a little bit differently versus just rushing through life. As adults, it feels like the years just really go by super fast. And it's because we're working, and you may have kids, and you have parents who are getting older, and you have all these things going on, but there's no breaks to the fast forward. And so really it's relearning how to put those breaks on and like just slow down a little bit more, and having the ritual of the tea, having the ritual of the oils, where it's not just it feels good, it smells good. You
Right.
know, I have a lavender one, but also even the blend, it smells very herbally and
Hmm.
earthy, and it's
It's
just
calming.
yes. And it's
Yep.
just the herbs, right? Like,
Yeah.
there's no essential oils in it, it is just herbs and olive oil. So,
Well, the kids have that saying, touch grass.
yep.
And that is a powerful saying, right? Which is, ingesting something made from herbs, whether or putting it on your body. I mean, there is back to that sort of primal human thing away from technology. It is sort of a form of touching grass, if you indulge me there. One other picture too, just that kind of tells to me this tells the story of Moonshine Wellness and what you're doing. And in the foreground here is a teapot.
Mhm.
And I'll describe this one if that's okay with you. This is you and what is the name of your former coworker and friend, Michelle, right? Yeah, and she's wearing scrubs and she has a
Oh,
stethoscope and she has a cup with some moon, the phases of the moon on it, and she's talking to you. And there's a plant in the foreground and tea, and you're drinking tea. You have some really dope earrings on and a purple sweater, and you can't really totally tell from the picture, but you're looking together at this bingo card that we put together. That's sort of a fun way for people to recognize themselves to start a conversation around burnout. I like this too, and there's some lavender in the background. I like this because we had such a fun day that day doing this photo shoot. But I also do think we initially saw you in a picture. You weren't wearing scrubs, but it was when you were in your nurse zone. And this picture shows you today where you are in your zone of wanting to help others. So talk a little bit more about Moonshine Wellness and what you're doing today. And then we'll go ahead and show those other slides that you gave me too.
Okay. So I work with people to, I work with individuals and work groups to recognize, prevent, and recover from burnout. And a lot of the recognition and prevention is important because, like I had said previously, the symptoms become very normalized. And so I do workshops and I do webinars, and I now have my own podcast, which is great, and a newsletter. And I am very passionate about helping people understand that there's so much like shame and guilt that goes around burnout and feeling like you should be able to handle what's going on and not understanding the greater system that we live and work in that creates a lot of trauma. And working in healthcare, whether you had trauma going into healthcare, which a lot of nurses and people who work in healthcare have come from traumatic backgrounds,
Mm.
you definitely experience trauma when you're working, and it doesn't matter. You don't have to work in an ER or an ICU to experience trauma, right? Like people coming in are in these situations that are very traumatic for them. Like they're not coming to the hospital for fun. And we have to experience that every day. And so my goal is to really help people recognize their symptoms and acknowledge them. And that's the reason I did the burnout bingo. I wanted something that was not triggering for people, but allowed them to recognize where they were. It's a self-assessment tool. So I do workshops and webinars, and I do coaching for people. My primary client are people who healthcare and nurses, but also I know the struggle is real for across the board, and I try to have a lot of resources for people. And I do twice a month a healing huddle where we talk about how to integrate those tools into your life, because a lot of times we know these tools to like, it's a constant, deep breathe, meditate, do these things for yourself, but then actually doing them is the hard part. And so I host a twice a month virtual healing huddle because I want people to talk about it. And sometimes you have to be in a space to be like, oh yeah, I used to do this thing and it really felt good, but now I don't do it. But this reminded me to start doing it again. And it's not hard, but sometimes you just need someone holding your hand and to help guide you back to where you feel more regulated and that you can like work through and not feel like you have to suffer. And there's a fair amount of nurses who feel like it's a badge of honor that we're suffering. And I'm here to change that narrative where no one should be suffering.
Yeah, I think that's part of our broader culture when you talk about end stage capitalism or sort of the badge of honor. I'm so busy. I'm doing too much. I'm suffering. There's a certain sort of Protestant, I think there's cultural things around that too, where it's sort of white supremacy is at play there as well. And it's about seeing our value from our productivity, right? Which is a real trap. And like you mentioned a couple times, you've touched on it here, the idea of nurses either having trauma or you mentioned maybe codependence, and it's a helping profession where if you have any kind of empathy or soul and you're going to see hard things, that's going to hurt you. So that, caring people go into this field like many of helping professions, but maybe there's even more risk then for some of these symptoms that you're talking about, right?
100%. Yeah, because we're not taught how to take care of ourselves. You're taught how to sacrifice yourself for other people, and then you're punished for when you do suffer or when you speak up.
Yeah.
And this corporate healthcare system that we're in wants you to suffer silently and then quietly leave. And they don't like it when there's a lot of pushback and a lot of
Yeah.
people coming together and saying, this isn't okay.
That's a good transition to this one, which is about your building community, the community building work that you're doing. Tell me about what we're looking at here.
So here in Seattle, me and a friend started a meetup happy hour at a local Chuck's Hop Shop. It's a local bar here in Seattle. And we meet on the last Monday of the month from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. at Chuck's in Central District. So it's just off of Union. And the idea is to create space for, it's not just for nurses, it's for everyone who works in healthcare, and to create space because our experiences are very unique in what we experience and how we experience it. And so it's not a trauma dumping session. We're not coming together just to see who the has it the worst. It's we're creating a space so where you can feel supported and seen and valued and with other people who work in these spaces, and to create a community within Seattle so we are more supportive. We become so siloed with you only knowing who you work with immediately and not other people on other floors, certainly not in other hospitals. And so this is a way to connect with other people within healthcare within the Seattle area. And so I invite not just nurses, but everyone who works in healthcare or in nursing students to come in and just be able to have a chance to hang out in a space kind of that's made for you. So yeah, so we've been doing this for 3 months now. Our next one is June 29th, and then it'll be July 27th will be the next one.
And I'm assuming people can find out about that on Moonshine Wellness website, on your website and your social media and
Correct.
all those things, right?
Yeah,
Which I'll have those in the show notes as well.
great. Yeah, so I list them out on my events page. If you go to my events page, I list out the Nurse Connect events. So it's just a way to bring people together because that's a lot of times that's what we're missing, and especially in the nurse community, it's very much nurses eat their young still, and we're not supporting each other. And my broad plan is to really change the culture in nursing.
And that reminds me of when you described when you were a new nurse and didn't really know what to expect and didn't know anything different from the environment that you were in, right? So I could picture someone new to the profession coming to one of your meetups and saying, well, I like this idea, or I want to avoid this, or learning from each other, sort of to have a better perspective on the whole field as it grows and evolves too. So for young Doris from the picture, this group would have been helpful, right?
Oh, 100%, because you don't know what you don't know. And a lot of times when you're walking onto a floor and there's no nurse that's been there over 5 years, that's a huge red flag. That
Yes.
means all the experienced nurses have left, and that's a problem because you don't have those more experienced nurses mentoring the younger nurses, and you're putting your license at risk and you don't even know it a lot of times.
So you dropped in, you led us right into the future with wanting to change the culture there. So that's our last part of the conversation, is the future. So this is an open-ended section. It could be goals that you personally have for your business. It could be how you want to see the culture change. But what's the future? I mean, we need nurses, right? We need people to take care of themselves, but we also need, as someone who's not a nurse, but you know, has medical care. I know nurses kind of hold things together. So maybe what's your message to someone like me who is in the healthcare world as a recipient of care, and then also for the future for people who are in the profession as well?
Yeah, it's my big goal is to become a culture changer and be on that forefront of how we change healthcare in general. We're the biggest workforce within the healthcare system. We are literally the backbone of the healthcare system. And we have been influenced a lot by the patriarchy, where we feel like you're fighting for the scraps of management and for the doctor's attention. That's probably not the best way to do, like it creates a lot of scarcity mindset where you feel like there's a competition for everything. And so you're not supportive of new nurses and you're not supportive of nurses who are having issues. There's a lot of stigma still around mental health. we feel like all of our patients need therapy, but
Right.
we're fine and we're not
Right.
fine. No one's fine. So, and
Yeah.
I really want to be on that forefront of changing the narrative and changing the culture. Essentially, that is my large picture, and
Mhm.
really rebuilding healthcare so it works for the people who work in healthcare and it feels supportive for us because then we can give our best patient care. And, an immediate kind of time frame is really working with individuals and working with companies, smaller facilities who feel that there's a lot of turnover and you can just see the burnout in your staff. And
Mhm.
I have a whole burnout to recovery program that I utilize with facilities to help them not just help their employees, but also create a culture change because that also has to change. You can't have a workshop and then think everything's going to be totally fine. There has to be some sort of culture change because the management style and how you treat your employees plays a huge part into how long your employees will stick around and what kind of care they give, right? You want to support your staff so they give excellent care to your patients.
I think, yeah, that totally makes sense that it's a culture shift, that it's not a Band-Aid. There's not like the back to the idea of taking a pill and fixing everything. Like that's sort of a myth, right?
Mhm.
That we've swallowed, no pun intended, and that it's more of a systemic culture shift. So I think it's really inspiring what you're doing. I think also we could, that's the big picture, but you inspire one person to do things differently and they go into their place where they work. We all know like the toxic sort of person or employee that can, that becomes contagious. But I
Mhm.
think a positive shift or more of a mentorship or non scarcity position is also contagious. So one step at a time, one person at a time also can have quite an impact as well.
Oh, for sure. I feel it's the ripple effect, right? Like
Yes.
where you have one raindrop and then you can see that ripple effect
Mhm.
for the people around. And if you don't participate in that toxic workplace environment, then you're showing other people how to be different. And s- it's a ripple effect. And the more we do it, the more we opt out of how we treat other people in a negative sort of way. It will continue to ripple out and create a culture change.
I think that's a great place to end it. Thank you so much, Doris Taylor, for sharing your story today.
Of
We
course.
we covered a lot. We went deep, but I think yeah, there's something to whether you're a nurse or somebody experiencing exactly what you're talking about, or you're somebody who knows a nurse or somebody or experiences burnout in your own life. These are all really human things that we've covered today. So I really
Yeah,
appreciate it.
and I have a lot of resources on my webpage.
Yeah.
I know how hard it can be to access things when you're exhausted and overwhelmed. And so I'm trying to make things as accessible as possible. So find me on my website, join one of my healing huddles, come to a Nurse Connect. Look forward to seeing everyone.